Sa, titulo. 22. Stop watering. The wildflower secret. You've seen those perfect, colorful wildflower meadows in the magazines, haven't you? The ones that look like a piece of the untouched American prairie just landed in someone's backyard, teeming with life and resisting the most brutal summer heat without a single yellow leaf. I used to look at those photos and think, I can do that. So I went out to my local Home Depot, bought a bunch of those generic wildflower mix, seed packets, tossed them onto a patch of dirt, and waited for the magic to happen. Spoiler alert, the magic never showed up. Most of what came up were aggressive weeds, and the few flowers that did sprout withered and died the second the July heat hit my yard. I felt like I had a black thumb for the simplest plants on earth. But here's the truth. If this has happened to you, it's not a lack of skill or some mysterious curse on your soil. You just got bad advice. Most of those mixes are full of filler seeds that aren't even native to your specific USDA zone. They're built for the store shelf, not for your real home environment. I want to save you the money, the wasted water, and the immense frustration I went through. Today, we're breaking the myth that wildflowers are just scatter and forget. We're going to talk about the secrets that actually make these plants whisper to pollinators even when the ground is cracking from a drought. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which factors decide whether your meadow thrives or becomes a patchy mess. And we're starting with our first plant survivor in less than a minute. The first thing you have to realize is that the plants at the nursery live in a different reality. They're pampered with professional irrigation systems and high-dose synthetic fertilizers. When you bring them home to a dry backyard in the middle of a Kansas or Texas summer, they go into shock. That's why we look to the natives. Let's start with a true American icon, the purple coneflower, or Echinacea. Now, the common mistake people make is treating these like delicate greenhouse petunias. I've seen neighbors dumping gallons of water on them every single day, which actually rots the crown and kills the plant faster than a drought ever would. The truth is that Echinacea has a deep, sturdy taproot designed to hunt for water feet below the surface. If you see the leaves drooping slightly at 2 p.m. in 95-degree heat, don't panic and grab the hose immediately. This is the plant's way of conserving energy. Instead, do the finger test. Stick your finger 2 inches into the soil. If it's bone dry that deep, then water. If it's just the surface that's dry, leave it alone. These plants actually need to struggle just a little bit during their first year to establish those deep roots. I remember my first patch. I babied them so much they grew tall, weak, and floppy. Then the first summer storm snapped them right in half. Once I stopped overparenting them, they grew sturdy and attracted every bee in the county. If you have pets, Echinacea is generally non-toxic, but keep the curious pups from digging up the roots, as that's where the plant stores its survival energy. One trick nobody tells you at the store is about the bloom trigger. If your coneflowers look healthy but aren't pushing out those signature purple petals, check your nitrogen levels. Too much fertilizer, the kind people spread on their lawns, actually tells the plant to grow foliage, not flowers. It's a classic trap. You spend money on plant food and end up with a green bush instead of a pollinator magnet. To fix this today, stop fertilizing. Let the soil lean out. These plants evolved in rocky, tough soil, not a luxury spa. Another quick action you can take right now is deadheading. When the flower starts to fade and turn brown, snip it off just above the next set of leaves. This tells the plant, hey, we're not done yet, and it will often send up a second wave of blooms. This is how you keep that whisper going all through the late summer drought. Just remember to leave a few seed heads at the very end of the season. The goldfinches in your neighborhood will thank you for the winter snack. It's all about working with the natural cycle, not fighting it with chemicals. But there is a bigger picture here. Why do some plants thrive while others, even native ones, seem to give up? It usually comes down to the way we prepare the ground. I've seen people spend $200 on native starts only to plant them in soil that acts like a brick. You can have the best plant in the world, but if the soil isn't speaking its language, it won't last a season. This is where most gardeners lose heart, but the fix is simpler than you think. It involves understanding how the water actually moves through your specific plot of land. I learned this the hard way after watching my backyard turn into a miniature swamp during a rainstorm and then a cracked desert 2 days later. If you've ever felt like you're fighting against your own yard, you're not alone. I've lived through the dead patches and the high water bills. I've spent the weekends hauling mulch and trying to fix nature, only to realize that nature didn't need fixing. It needed me to get out of the way and provide the right foundation. We often think of wildflowers as delicate, but they are some of the toughest organisms on the planet if you give them the right start. In the next section, we're going to talk about a plant that is the absolute workhorse of the American garden, but it has one specific weakness that kills it in 90% of suburban yards. You know why this happens even when you water correctly. Sometimes the water isn't even reaching the roots because of a hidden crust on your soil that forms during the heat. I'll show you the reason and how to break it in just a moment. That crust I mentioned. It's a common enemy in American backyards, especially in places with heavy clay or areas that have been baked by the sun for weeks. You pour a gallon of water on your plants, and it just beads up and rolls away like it's hitting a paved driveway. I spent years wondering why my black-eyed Susans, Rudbeckia hirta, were wilting despite my daily watering sessions. I felt like a failure, a plant killer, until I realized the water wasn't even getting past the first half-inch of soil. This is where a lot of people throw money away without realizing it, buying more plants to replace the dead ones when the solution is actually just a simple adjustment to how you prep the ground. Black-eyed Susans are the workhorses of the drought-tolerant garden, but even a workhorse needs a drink to get started. What they sell you at the store is a plant in a plastic pot filled with peat moss. When you put that into your backyard soil, especially during a dry spell, the two types of soil don't talk to each other. The peat dries out and shrinks, creating a gap, and your native soil stays hard as a rock. To fix this today, don't just dig a hole and drop the plant in. Use the soak and poke method. Before you plant, soak the hole with a gallon of water and let it drain. Then, once the plant is in, use a small hand rake to gently break up the surface around it. This prevents that hard crust from forming. I learned this the hard way after losing a whole flat of Rudbeckia I bought at a local nursery sale. I thought they were easy, but I didn't give their roots a path to follow. Now, my backyard is a sea of gold every July, and I barely touch the hose once they're established. A quick checklist for the ideal spot for these golden beauties. They need at least 6 hours of direct sun. If they get too much shade, they get leggy, long, weak stems that flop over the moment a summer thunderstorm rolls through. Also, watch out for powdery mildew, which looks like someone spilled flour on the leaves. This usually happens when the air is humid but the soil is dry, or when you water the leaves instead of the base. The fix? Water early in the morning, right at the ground level. I tell my neighbors all the time, the leaves don't drink, the roots do. If you see those white spots, don't reach for the heavy chemicals. Just prune the worst leaves and improve the airflow. It's a small adjustment that saves the plant and the pollinators. And if you have an apartment or a smaller suburban lot, you often have those dead zones. That awkward corner by the AC unit or the strip of dirt along the driveway that feels like a furnace in July. I used to look at those spots and think nothing could grow there but weeds and disappointment. I spent a fortune on fancy mulch and miracle fertilizers trying to keep hydrangeas alive in those spots. I failed, of course. But that's when I discovered blanket flower, Gaillardia. This plant is a warrior. It actually thrives in the heat that kills everything else. If you have a spot in your yard that feels like a desert, this is your answer. It's the protector of the dry garden because it covers the ground, keeping the soil cooler for the plants nearby. What nobody tells you at the store is that Gaillardia actually hates rich soil. If you put it in a spot with high-quality potting mix and lots of organic compost, it will grow fast, look great for 3 weeks, and then suddenly die. It's a short-lived perennial that basically burns out. if it's pampered too much. I lived this mistake myself. I thought I was being a good plant parent by giving it the best dirt money could buy, only to watch it rot from the inside out. The truth is, these plants love the trash, soil sandy, rocky, and lean. If you have a spot where the grass won't even grow, try a few blanket flowers. They'll bloom their heads off from June until the first frost, and they whisper to the tiniest native bees that other flowers ignore. A quick 7-day rescue plan if yours looks rough. First, stop watering it every day. Most people drown their Gaillardia thinking the heat is the problem when the real killer is wet feet. Second, check the drainage. If the water doesn't disappear into the ground within 10 seconds of pouring, you need to mix in some coarse sand or fine gravel right around the root zone. I did this last summer with a patch that was looking yellow and sad, and within a week, they were pushing out bright red and yellow sunwheel blooms again. It's a small, cheap fix that makes a massive difference. For my friends with kids or pets, Gaillardia is generally safe, but some people find the sap can irritate sensitive skin, so maybe wear gloves if you're doing a heavy pruning session. It's not a danger, just a tip to keep your gardening afternoon pleasant. And if you're in a colder USDA zone, like Zone 4 or 5, make sure you don't cut these back too early in the fall. Leaving the foliage helps protect the crown from the winter freeze. I learned that the hard way after a particularly brutal polar vortex a few years back. The goal here isn't just to have a pretty garden for a month, it's to create a landscape that survives the highs and the lows of our American seasons. When you start picking plants that are native to your region, you're not fighting nature anymore. You're giving it a platform to shine. I remember the first time I saw a hummingbird moth hovering over my blanket flowers. It was a moment of realization. These plants aren't just decorations. They are life support for creatures we often forget are our neighbors. It's a powerful feeling to know your little patch of land is doing some good in the world. But wait, there's a specific 10-second rule that prevents 80% of plant deaths in these dry areas, and it's not what you think. I'll show you the simple test that determines if your plant will thrive or drown in the next part. That 10-second rule is the ultimate truth about soil health that no marketing campaign will ever tell you. You see, the biggest mistake I see gardeners make, and I made this for years, is thinking that a drought-tolerant garden just needs to be dry. But dry and drainage are two completely different things. You could have a patch of soil that feels like a brick on top, but 2 inches down, it's holding on to stagnant water like a heavy sponge. This is the silent killer of native wildflowers. When you dig your hole to plant that beautiful new butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa, fill it with water first. If that water is still standing there after 10 seconds, your plant is going to struggle to breathe. Butterfly weed, specifically, has a long taproot that will rot almost instantly if it sits in heavy, wet clay during a rainy spring. I've lost more butterfly weed to wet feet than I ever have to a heat wave. If your test fails, don't give up. You don't need to dig up the whole yard. Just mix in some coarse grit or organic matter to the top few inches of soil to help that water travel. This simple test is the difference between a garden that whispers to pollinators and one that just sits there, silent and struggling. I want to speak to the busy folks for a second, the ones who feel like they don't have time for a high-maintenance landscape. This is where native wildflowers really shine. Once they are established, which usually takes about 1 full growing season, your workload drops significantly. I spend maybe 10 minutes a week in my native patch, mostly just pulling a stray weed or two while I drink my coffee. Compare that to the hours people spend mowing, fertilizing, and watering a thirsty lawn. It's an economy of time and money that just makes sense. You save on the water bill, you save on the miracle grow, and you gain a front row seat to nature's show. I remember the first time I saw a monarch butterfly caterpillar on my butterfly weed. I realized that my garden was actually working. It was doing a job that no manicured lawn could ever do. If you feel guilty because you don't have a perfect garden, let that go. A perfect garden isn't one that looks like a plastic showcase. It's one that supports life and doesn't require you to be a slave to it. For my friends in apartments or condos, the 10-second rule applies to your pots too. If you water your container and the water sits on top for more than a few seconds, your soil has become hydrophobic. It's actually repelling the water. To fix this today, take a pencil or a chopstick and gently poke holes throughout the soil to create channels for the water to reach the roots. Then, give it a long, slow soak. I do this once a month for my porch containers during the peak of summer. It's a simple, free rescue that can bring a wilting plant back to life in 24 hours. It's these little observations, the secrets I've learned by failing and trying again, that make gardening so rewarding. You start to see the patterns. You start to understand that the plant isn't being difficult, it's just trying to tell you what it needs. If you're wondering where to start, pick one plant. Don't try to plant an entire meadow this weekend. Choose one native species, like the Coreopsis tickseed, which is incredibly forgiving and thrives in almost any USDA zone. It's bright, it's cheery, and it's practically bulletproof. Plant it in a spot that gets at least 6 hours of sun, do your drainage test, and then watch what happens. You'll see the bees arrive within days. You'll see the color stay bright even when your neighbor's lawn is turning brown, and you'll realize that you don't have a black thumb at all. You just needed to stop fighting against nature and start listening to its whispers. It's a journey, not a destination, and every small step you take makes your corner of the world a little bit better. But there's one thing that catches everyone off guard. What happens when the season ends? Many people think they need to clean up the garden for winter, but that's actually the worst thing you can do for your wildflowers and the pollinators. I only understood this after losing my entire population of beneficial insects one year. I'll tell you the adjustment that changes everything and ensures your garden comes back twice as strong in the next part.